Thank you. Apology for that. Before we move on to point 3, just under attendance, it was brought under my attention that there is a delegate from Western Cape Provincial Government that is also attending this meeting. If we can just ask the lady just to introduce herself to the meeting, that will be appreciated. Let me just ask the...
Oh, sorry. Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, councillors. Good morning, colleagues. My name is Nomfundo. I'm from GLG, Good Governance. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. Then we can move to point 3, the noting of the provision of Schedule 7, and I will give over to the Chairperson of the Impact just to make a note on that.
Thank you, Chairperson. In terms of the Code of Conduct, provision of Schedule 7 for all councillors, I think all of us will note councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of point 4, can I get an indication if there is anybody present in this meeting that have anything to declare or is in conflict with any item or any sub-item in any one of these documents that we're going to discuss today? Any indication of a conflict of interest? Then I accept that there's nobody present that have any conflict of interest with the agenda in front of us. Point 5 is the communication by the chairperson, and there's only 2 things that I would like to share with this meeting. The first one, the purpose of this meeting is to look at the annual financial statements, the draft statements. There's also a draft annual report that will be tabled to council by December. And then there's the performance report that will go hand in hand with the annual financial statements that will be submitted. And the purpose of this meeting is to make sure that from our point of view, with the information available to us and with the analysis and the peer reviews that was done, that these documents that is in front of us, the way it was compiled, that we are satisfied that a sound process and methodology and the procedure was followed to compile these documents, that the information provided in these documents is a true reflection of the year that is under review, and that we can trust that the information in these documents is reliable, and with the knowledge and the peer reviews that was done, that we accept that this is a correct reflection. And lastly, to make specific notes if there are anything that we are unsure of, that we query, or that we are of the opinion need further revision or further analysis before it can actually be presented to the AG. From the Audit Committee side, we have specifically asked 2 of the Audit Committee members, Mr. Suren Maraja, as well as Mr. Christo Engelbrecht, to sit down with the role players within the municipality and use the magnifying glass, working through these documents, and give also from the Audit Committee perspective whether we are in agreement with these documents or whether we are not in agreement with these documents. And when we get to the part of discussing these documents, I will ask that one or both of them will give feedback on behalf of the Audit Committee. What did they found? If I remember correctly, there was a meeting past Friday where we have sat down and discussed these documents and did a little bit of more thorough analysis. Of course, the other 2 members, myself and Advocate Ntunzi, it was also our responsibility to work through these documents, but especially the focus on the annual report and the performance report. And we will also make our comments available as far as those other 2 documents are concerned. And the impact, of course, from a political point of view, you look with a different set of eyes. Our eyes is very technical at this stage to make sure that we agree with the documents. From an impact, you may have a different view on these documents. This is the only comments and communication from my side. I will hand over to the chairperson of the impact for any communications from her side.
Thank you very much, Chairperson of APEC. First, I would like to welcome the viewers and this meeting is open to public as per the provision of MPEC. And I also would like to welcome my members. Thank you for making your time to be available in this important meeting. Chairperson, I just want to say, and also to the administration. Chairperson, I just want to say and allude that the importance of this meeting of a combined. In the past, we used to have different meetings, but at some point we saw that because of the technicalities of the financial statements, it was crucial for the assurance body to do a combination, so that from a technical side, you are able to give us your perspective, and then also it feeds to us as the political side that also matters that perhaps we might have not have picked up. And what is also critical is how the information that will be provided and that information assists us to make informed decisions. So that is why the combined assurance. But critically so, that I think that from now on, according to the Amendment Structures Act, the audit committee and also the internal audit, it gives us now to have more working relationship, because it says that the documents or the reports that need also to come to MPEC. It means now that we need to be able to sit down and say that how can we do assurance? How can are the areas of reviews? I will give an example that, for instance, the IT reviews have then been made in the institution in terms of checking of the processes. So all those things, they require us as the APEC and also in the internal auditor unit, so that we can be able to work together. And this meeting, after this meeting, what is going to happen? We're going to break away, because MPEC, we must be able to make our own recommendation. But it's just now we are here as a sharing session and also as a deliberation session. Then from there, we can, with all the information, we are able to go and make the recommendation that we need to make. And for that, I hope that our deliberation will be fruitful. Thank you, Chairperson, so much. And I invite you and your committee that we need to be able to meet again, so that we can have and identify reviews that we need in the organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Without further ado, as they usually say, I'm going to hand over. Suren and Christo, you can indicate who will take us through your analysis of the draft financial statements for the year ended 30 June 2022. Christo, will it be you or Suren?
Suren was obviously Friday was in attendance for a large while, and I was there the whole time. I don't want to go to much detail, Chairperson, but for what was very good for me was that there was an independent person that the institution got in, a guy from Moors, that assists them from a technical viewpoint, and from a financial statement viewpoint, and maybe Suren can also add to that, is that I'm very much happy about how it was compiled and the detail thereof. There's just a couple of points that we can raise later on, pertaining to certain questions I want to ask about certain risks, certain worrying things that come up to mind. But in the preparation stage and the completeness of the financial statements and how it was done, I'm satisfied. Jan Willem was also at the meeting, so I think it was a fruitful discussion, and the financial statements per se is properly prepared. And it gives me satisfaction that Moors from a highly technical side also assisted the district municipality in compiling, and I also have obviously also a look into how it was compiled and make sure that all compiles to the various legislation and financial draft statements and all those GRAP issues that was done. So I'll hand back to you, Chair. Maybe if Suren could add maybe something.
Suren, over to you. Suren, you can continue. Make sure that you are unmuted. Is there any technical problem for Mr. Marajat to log in or to open up his communication? Right.
He is logged in, Mr. Dippenaar. I can see him as part of our participants, but his video and he's muted. I can send him a message here to ask to unmute.
Suren, can we get an indication if there is sound on your side and that you can continue with comments from your side? I think what we're going to do while we wait for Mr. Marajat to come online, we're going to give the CFO a chance from his side also to give some indication, and also the type of, there was quite a number of corrections that was made based on the, not corrections, improvements. I don't want to call it corrections, more improvements. So CFO, over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning to you and Councillor Chaba and all the other colleagues in the room. Chair, I maybe feedback on Friday's meeting, as Mr. Labuschagne said, we had quite a thorough discussion through all the technical matters. Mr. Maraj himself raised two specific points, that one, that we are still following up on to make sure that what he has commented on, we are treating correctly in the financial statements. And so we wanted to thank the audit committee for their contribution at that meeting. Mr. Labuschagne had, like he said, he had questions more specific, risks and on ratios, etc., that he wanted to raise, which I told him, I'm sure this meeting will also dealt with, especially that the impact is here from oversight point of view. So in terms of process, we did have a thorough process to compile the financial statements. We again consulted the stuff that AG raised last year to make sure that we don't have repeat findings. And then because of the technical review that Mubesco Moore Consortium assisted us with, I'm also confident that we can submit these financial statements on Wednesday. We're still busy with the final review, so there might still be a few small changes, but we will submit these financial statements. And I don't believe there's any material errors in that financial statement. Otherwise, I would have said, we would have had a different discussion. And what I can also offer the meeting is I did prepare a 5-minute high-level overview of the financial statements, if you would want me to present that. Some of it is, again, some of the detail in the financial statement, but then also raising a few ratio issues and long-term financial sustainability, etc. Because you're saying this is a combined APAC impact meeting. So when you wish, I can do that for the meeting.
That is 100% fine. And members, please take note that the point 8 was also a specific internal audit review that was done. So when we look at the financial statements, automatically take point 8 also in consideration, because the two goes hand in hand. CFO, please continue.
If I can share my screen then, please. Apologies, Mr. Lamprecht, I got your surname wrong. Apologies for that. It's not Labuschagne.
No problem.
Can you perhaps take that sidebar? So I think there's about 18 slides, and I will try to not take too much of your time. As a chairperson have indicated, I'm sure that you have read as high level through the financial statements. So also, because I can't have two screens at the same time, if you would want to open your financial statements that was circulated as part of the agenda, I think I will focus mainly on pages. It's page 7 in the download, which is page 6 of the financial statements, which will be the financial position, and then the financial performance on page 7, and then I'll also make some reference to notes at this stage in the presentation. So in terms of the financial performance for municipality, the net deficit for the year is a very big number of 20 million rand. The deficit budget was for 11 million rand budget, but the actual is 20 million rand deficit. Last year, we also showed a deficit of just over 20 million rand. The reason for the variance between the budgeted deficit of 11 million and the actual deficit of 20 million is two things. The one is the revenue is lower by 5.6 million rand, and that revenue was in the budget for properties that is still in the process of being donated to Garden Route. It is from George Municipality to Urban for use for the build of a district fire station. So that would have then been an entry in the asset register and the donated revenue of 5.6 million, and that 5.6 now isn't there. Obviously, that is a non-cash entry, and we will see it come through as that transaction concludes with the lawyers this year. And then the second main reason for the variance is the debt impairment provision movement is larger than in the budget. And unfortunately, that is something that we as an organization struggle with the collection of debt. But as it becomes old, the GRAP standards then require of us to make a provision for impairment. So that also isn't cash yet. So it is just a movement in the providing for the possibility of not being able to collect. And between those two lines, it basically makes up exactly the 10.1 million variance. Then year-on-year comparison, the revenue and the expenditure increased by 20 million rand, mostly due to additional activity from roads. So for new colleagues in the room, a very large, I would say half of our income statement is from roads activities, the service we deliver for the provincial department. And that is more or less in and out in terms of revenue and expenditure. So we get the allocation and we spend it. We do keep a portion for a management fee, but you will many times see this change in revenue and expenditure, which has a basically offsetting effect because of the way that contract with roads works. So I think the thing to see here is that there wasn't really much movement on our own revenue generation yet in 21-22, which is obviously the main thing that we are trying to address from a financial sustainability point of view. Then also just for information on the financial performance side, to note that 46% of our revenue is from equitable share and conditional grants, and 46% of the revenue is that roads allocation. So between the grants from National Treasury and the allocation from roads, that makes up 92% of our total revenue. I think concerning matters to raise is ones that you are well aware of, is the equitable share grew by 1% in that year under review. Our employment cost to total expenditure ratio is at 66% at the end of 21-22. And therefore, this focus that we must have on the realization of alternative resources in the very short to medium term. I would say that if we can't address this in the next 3 to 4 years, then we will have very dire financial, we'll be in a very dire financial position, and they might then have to be strong decisions made. On the statement of financial position, quickly on our assets, there wasn't much activity this year. We had a big evaluation exercise in 1920. We do not need to do one again. So the movement on there was just the additions for the year of 12.5 million. and the depreciation of 4.6 million. Then you'll also find on our statement of financial position something that you might find peculiar, and that is there under assets. You will see employment benefits. So typically you will find on the liability side, you'll find this at the top there, non-current employee benefits, and the liability there is the liability to pay post-retirement benefits, the main one being medical aid. But included in that liability amount that I showed you there is also again the roads portion for the roads officials. And under that same agreement with province, this institution claims the roads portion from the provincial government. So we show the full liability, but because of that specific arrangement, we also show the roads portion as an asset. Accounting doesn't allow us to offset the number, but we have to show both. That is something that you won't find in many financial statements, but in the district municipalities in the Western Cape, you will find that. Then current assets, we've got very small inventory at year end. It was counted with assistance from internal audit. Then our data book, that receivable from exchange transactions, the gross amount is 75 million. And then more than half of it is provided for impairment. Again, talking to the age of the debt that only comes to us typically after a long legal process. I think the last point there I would also then want to highlight is from a cash point of view. There was a 27 million rand decrease in our cash position from last year to this year. The reason for that is that our full capital budget is funded from reserves. So as I alluded to before, there was a 12.5 million rand additions on the capital side. And then the remainder of that 27 million decrease is because of the deficit for the year. So that is something that we must address urgently as council and management, because if we were to continue with a 27 million rand cash decrease over the next 5 years, then the full remainder will be depleted. On the liability side, we spoke about the post-retirement benefits that the actuaries assist us with in calculating, or they calculated. The only other thing maybe to mention there is unspent transfers and subsidies. That's also something that you will find there on the face of the balance sheet, 5.4 million. Last year it was also around that amount. So that 5.4 million is what council included in the rollover budget that was approved last week to ensure that that money can then be spent in this current year and that it is not lost, that we do not have to pay it back to any other sphere of government. And then on the capital replacement reserve, you'll see 12 million rand of capital purchases, which might be decreased, but they will also replace the depreciation charge annually to try to support that capital replacement reserve. So the net reduction was 7 million rand in the year. There's always also an employment benefit reserve, and the point of that is to cash back a portion of these post-retirement benefits that I've mentioned a few times now, and that fund and reserve was approved by council in a new policy in 2019-20. And then you will see the final decrease in the accumulated surplus then being 12 million rand for the year. I'm not going to go to all of these notes because I think there's a lot of detail that I don't think that this committee might want. You can obviously ask questions on any of the notes you wish, but this is very standard accounting treatment of matters in our financial records. On note 14, there's a breakdown of the unspent transfers, unspent grants essentially, and the largest one being the allocation for the human settlements. Again, it's a provincial allocation. And as I've said, it's now included in this year's budget. So that will be spent this year. That I've touched on, so I don't want to. Maybe to say that you might have seen in note 39, there's correction of errors, which is also an accounting term for when you were, if you were to work through your numbers this year and realize that in the prior year there was a number that was incorrect. you are then completely allowed, and you should then correct it. So that there was a question in the past whether such a disclosure would cause queries from the AG, and it wouldn't, because those are done because of what the GRAP standards require of us. There wasn't many, but you would have perhaps seen that there is a note that talks to the correction of errors. Then I'm reaching the end of, I'm going towards the end of my slides. In note 46, there's a note that discloses unauthorized expenditure, which is basically an overspend per department on the on the budgeted expenditure and the actual expenditure. But currently there is none on the operational side or on the capital side. For fruitless and wasteful, there wasn't any transactions recorded in the current year. For irregular, there is, I think, the last one I saw was 12 million rand, but we are just finalizing that number also. And again, councillors might remember this explanation of the composition of the BAC that the AG raised 2 years ago, where all the formal awards were then declared as irregular. So all those ongoing expenditure on those awards will cause irregular in our financial statements, but it is decreasing as those contracts are coming to their conclusion. So I think it was 45 million rand in year one, then it was 25 million rand, and current year is 12 million. So I'm sure by the end of the current financial year, that number will decrease again significantly, and then perhaps by the end of the following financial year, all those contracts that were declared irregular would then have expired, which would then mean, in theory, we shouldn't have any irregular expenditure to disclose. Deviations is also something that readers of the financial statements go to. So the final number that we're disclosing for this year is 4 million rand, compared to the 2 million rand of last year. And the very easy spot to, when you compare the 2 years, is because in the 2021-22 financial year, there were more fires than in the prior year. And then you will remember that aerial firefighting services currently, because of us struggling to get a market-related tender in place, those aerial services are done through deviations, which is the main reason why the deviations increased from the prior year to the current year. Then there was always a disclosure in the financial statements for the PPP, public-private partnership with the regional landfill site. But last year we did report that the council has resolved to not follow that route anymore. So this year is the first year in a number of years we will have no disclosure on the public-private partnership, because for the year under review, effectively there was no activity on such a project. Of course, there's lots of activity on the landfill side, but it's no longer done under the PPP. Contingent liabilities, the formal position didn't change from the prior year to this year. So there's a property transfer agreement with Mossel Bay that there's a few matters pending. So there's some disclosure on a few properties there. And then there's still unresolved property discussions between us and Nisa municipality with regards to a few urban that we have in our name and therefore on our books. But they are of the view that it is Nisa's property. There has been various engagements to try to address it. But as at 30 June 2022, it is unresolved, and therefore we must keep it in our disclosures. In terms of financial health, the two most common ratios used is the current ratio and the cash cover. So for the year under review, our current ratio is 2.85 times. It's a comparison between current assets and current liabilities. So we ended the year above the National Treasury norm, and it's very similar to our position last year. I think even though our current ratio seems to be healthy and it didn't change much between last year and this year, I do not think that we should disregard the challenge with our cash that I've mentioned in the past. And also the cash cost cover is at the amount of months you can continue with your operations when you look at your cash position. And again, ours is 5 times, which is above the norm, but without really reiterating the same, I think we do have financial sustainability issues to address. And then I think that is what I've mentioned there is the grant dependency, the fact that our actual expenditure keeps on increasing, but our revenue doesn't. Our grants remain grow at a minimal percentage every year. And things like employment costs, for instance, increased this year with 7%. So that gap just keeps on increasing. Therefore, our projects to realize additional revenue streams must really be the focus of what we do this year. The regional landfill site will become operational towards the end of the current financial year. That will bring some financial relief. But again, similar almost to the roads function, it will be money in and money out. But the portion, I think currently, if I have the numbers correctly in my mind, I think it will be in the area of additional 60 million rand worth of revenue, but the expenditure will be 55 million. So even though you see 60 million additional revenue in your books, what your bottom line, the effect on the bottom line is only marginal. It's only a percentage of that gross increase in revenue. And then, as council have spoken many times at strategic sessions, the properties and the resorts, we'll have to make decisions on how those are dealt with. And we must do so expediently because we need to make financial decisions. And then also reference to the Committe projects, which has also been discussed at various platforms of council, which is like the renewable energy, fresh produce market, and various property transactions. So that is high level. I'm sure the committees will have lots more to add and to ask, but that is a presentation for your consideration.
Thank you, CFO. Can I get an indication, Suren, if you can continue from your side with comments? Suren, can I get an indication if you can make your contribution now?
Thank you, Chair. I received communication from Mr. Maharaj that he's struggling with connection and is not yet connected back. He says he keeps on being kicked out of the meeting. He's not yet connected. I kept asking if he's connected, but I'm in communication with him. And as soon as he's able to stabilize his login, then I will inform the meeting for him to continue. Chair.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to open the floor for comments and also for questions. The important thing that I really would like to highlight, the purpose of this meeting is to look at a historical period in time. These financial statements indicate to us what happened in the past year, but it also indicates to us certain risks and certain concerns and certain realities that need to be taken seriously and into consideration when council and municipality make decisions about the future. Our purpose is predominantly to make sure that these documents are a true reflection. We do not comment whether the decisions made by council is good or bad decisions, right or wrong decisions. That is up to a council to make those decisions. Our responsibility is to look at the process and the procedures and the legislation that is required in order to make these decisions and come to these conclusions. However, it's also our responsibility, and it was also highlighted in the annual financial statements, that we also have to put forward the concerns. And if we agree with the concerns as raised in the annual financial statements, we also put that forward to council, and we ask council also to take that into consideration whenever decisions are made in this council. The floor is open for comments and any questions.
Chair, I've got a couple of things that I would like to highlight.
Please continue.
The CFO have highlighted a lot of things. I just want to reiterate that is really in accordance with him. I think the cash situation, yeah, we can't lose. We can't. 20 million going to take us 8 years, and then there's no money left. The second thing is we got a huge asset base which we're not utilized to generate income, and we obviously also to seriously look at that as to how to maximize our assets in of the municipality to generate the necessary income. Then there's a question I want to ask. I'm here on the audit committee. There's an exit gratuity of 1 million that was paid, and according to what I've heard is that that same gentleman is then reappointed after his term expired. So if I could get clarity on that, because that doesn't make sense to me, to pay someone and then you just reemploy it. I mean, then everyone's gonna for me, it's a waste of money. So I just want to maybe highlight that and maybe get some analysis. I believe the council have approved that policy, but we should maybe we need to elaborate on that, and then if someone then can also give me some more insights pertaining to that, because it doesn't make sense to me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Christo. As Councillor Taute, I'm right.
That's right. Chairperson, I'm going to try in English. I want to add on to what the gentleman just said now. And I also have the same kind of concern about this, about especially that gratuity issue. I want to actually, I'm part of impact, and I want to ask and kind of make a recommendation that the council revisit that policy about this exit gratuity. Because what the gentleman just said there is very true. In that policy, it said that in the policy, and I'm speaking under correction now because I haven't got the policy in front of me, but I can still remember, it's for non-returning employees. And the person concerned in this statement, the person concerned returned to council. And the policy is still there. And what I've picked up, it's not only this person, but also there's other employees too who are who also get these gratuity, these exit gratuity as in that policy of council. So I, as an impact member who are supposed to have an oversight role, I want to ask council, I want to ask impact to make a recommendation to council that we should revisit that policy in the first place and either scrap it in total, because I have my concerns about that too, about that policy itself. It's a policy being approved by the previous council. That's what I picked up when I came here. And part of that concern is also the high employer, the 66% employer cost for this council. And I mean, we need to, and I think that CFO also mentioned it, we need to sit down and see how we're going to save money and pull our belts tighter. And this is one thing where we can pull our belt tighter if we can remove this policy and stop this exit gratuity. I have a big concern about it. There's people on, and I can still remember in that policy, it's for people who are on a contract basis, but there's a lot of people on contract basis, but they are not part of this exit gratuity because it's only, I won't say reserved for certain employees. That's my concern about it. So I don't know if I can make a recommendation or if I can just raise my concern as an MPF member, but I really would like our council to go back, revisit that policy or scrap it in total and stop this exit gratuity thing. I don't think it's right. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, and all the speakers that were before us. For me, Chair, I think what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to be a bit on the technical side. Reason being because we need to understand from a financial perspective what happened. For me, if you look in pages 62, you find that in the notes of the annual financial statement under 12.4, the exit gratuity. There, Chair, it gives us the balances in the beginning of the year and so forth. So it tells you that there is some, there were some money that were paid, but I'm more interested in the notes that goes with it. And I'll tell you why, Chairperson, is that it says in the case of employees whose employment contract are linked to political office bearer, they are automatically eligible to an exit gratuity equal to 10% of the annual remuneration packet for each completed year of service payable when their contract terminates. Now, if you look at 12.4, right below it, and then you see that councillor pays back. There, if you look, it is say the upper limits for councillor remuneration was effective from 1st July 2021, was gazetted in June 2022. It means it gives you a history when it was effective. Now, with this exit gratuity, I've checked the policy. The policy, Chair, was effective from June 2021. That is when the policy was effective. But if you look in the amounts that we are having, the amounts, they go back in time. Now, my question is, how was those calculations were done? Because to my understanding of good governance, you start your calculations on the time that the effect when the policy was in effect. It means from 2021 June up to forward. How was that this went into retrospective? I did not see anything that in the policy that said retrospective. I did not pick up any council resolution that was saying that the payments must be done in retrospective. I need, Chair, that explanation. Because it has to, from where I'm sitting, the calculations, they have to start from the 1st of June, 2021, when the policy was in effect. That is one aspect from that policy I would like to have. And also for those other, because if you look also in pages where you look at the employees, and of course, when you see where the incumbent from the senior manager, the MM, you will also see that that gratuity was paid at one point. It was paid out. And for me, that is my first question. Why that? Even the policy is silent, but shouldn't we have had a go-ahead somewhere to tell us where to start? Why did we have to go back? The second one, Chairperson, it's about, it's in pages, where is it now? It's pages 86, the basic salary, pages 68. If you look in the remuneration with the basic salaries there, I see that in the 2021, you have as a basic salary from the municipal manager, it's 1.86.2. Now, I need some, please, explanation, or just to give me an understanding that if you, according to the upper limits, in the upper limits, you are, if you go above the upper limit, you get what you call a waiver. Correctly, Jeff? A waiver needs to, you need to have a waiver in this financial year of review. And also that you also do it in every yearly, you're supposed to also to check your financial conditions, because if you don't have the finance, then you will have to retract to go back. But I would like to know, do we have a waiver for that 1.8? Was there a waiver to give it for it to be on a 1.8? Because as per the regulation, you have to have a waiver. Even if it goes back in time, but every year you should be able to have that, because that means your financials were looked at, they are healthy, and you are able to continue on that approval. So where is that approval? I would like to have an attachment of that approval. And also, if you look, Chair, in that basic salary, then in the year of 2022, you see now it goes to 1.6. Chair, I think the CFO, you need to help me understand here, because somewhere we will need to have a breakdown. We need to have a breakdown in terms of, all of a sudden it was 1.8 and then it went to 1.6. When did it begin to be in 1.6? When did it end to be in 1.8? Because if I could check, if I can see, somewhere there should have been a pattern of 1.8. I think even in 2022, there was a 1.8. So I would like you to give us a background from within the 6 months of that 1.6. When did it begin to be 1.6? That is another one, Chair. Secondly, is the payments in lieu of leave. Chairperson, I'm not sure whether the senior managers that do they sell their leave? How is leave? As a senior manager, do you sell out your leave? What does the legislation say? I would like that explanation, and how did we come about? Because if I check everybody else from the executive, nobody else has that. So for me, just automated, but I would like you to assist me in terms of how did you do the calculation. What I have an understanding of though is that, so you have to explain to me from 2021, that is the explanation I want. The 2022, I understand, because if you exit, then you leave, then it should be paid, because the legislation says in terms of death, in terms of the death, the retirement, if there's you incapacitated or things like that. So it's very explicit on how you should be paid. So, but in 2021, there we are, we see that the payment of leave has been paid. I need those explanations. Chairperson, I think from now, I've got plenty of those, but I thought it for now, let us have that, because also, for now, I think I would like those explanations, because there's still some other explanation I would like. Thank you, Chair. I think those will give us a direction. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, CFO. I believe you make note of those 3 specific questions. If you can go through them one by one, dealing with the policy first, then with the waiver, and then with the lieu of leave.
Thank you, Chairperson. If you allow me just one comment on what Councillor Tauter said. If you mentioned that the issue of employment cost, the 66%. And I just want to add that we've got 2 options to address that percentage. It's either we tighten our belts, which he has said, which I agree with, but the alternative is to increase our revenue, because then that number will be calculated based on a larger expenditure number. If, for instance, you bring in the 60 million additional expenditure on the landfill side, that number changes from 66 to 58%. I'm not saying we mustn't tighten our belts. I'm just raising this to council for us to manage going forward. It's either cut or build on the revenue side, which will then have an effect on that percentage. To Councillor Lechaba's questions, the exit gratuity, the policy question, the policy was as the other lady has said, it was approved in June 2021. The policy sets out the way that this benefit needs to be calculated. It doesn't make specific mention to non-returning officials. So perhaps that is something that council can consider going forward. It just says at the end of the term of employees whose contracts are linked to the political term. And the way that we interpreted it and the way it was audited as well is to say that the policy comes into effect in June. And what it says is there are officials linked to a certain, that are employed in a certain manner. And once the contract terminates, they are entitled to this exit gratuity. So even though, the policy didn't say to be calculated only from date of approval, it says the policy comes into effect on the date of approval. And the way that that was read is to say the policy says that once people go, they will get 10% of all the years that they've worked. So I acknowledge that there is this question on that the policy intend to mean to be calculated on the day of approval, or as the wording of the policy says, does the policy come into effect on the date of approval? And there is a different interpretation. So the way that it was interpreted when the actual payments were made, and the way that the Auditor General interpreted it when they audited that disclosure last year. Councillor Chapa has mentioned that there's a note 12.4, which last year included a provision of 1.6 million rand. So as at 30 June last year, when you look at all the 4.5 years that colleagues have worked, there was already a value of 1.6 million. We've included in the financials last year. The AG audited in such a manner, and their interpretation was also because the policy comes into effect. What does the policy say? It say that at the end of the term, someone is remunerated 10% for 5 years. Of course, the committee can do with that as you please, but that is the simple explanation. The policy came into effect on the date of approval, and the policy says at the end of your term, you get 10% for every year worked. That is the way it was interpreted.
Please.
Thank you for that. But then how come now? That is why I wanted to check the pattern. How come now the other, if you go down, is it page 63? When you were giving for councillors, I'm just looking at chairperson, I'm showing a pattern. If you look at that one, you'll see that very same similar situation. You are talking about the effectiveness of it and then where you began to do your calculation. Why was it different in this one? That is why for me, it doesn't make, I need that to come into fruit. Because if you look there in the councillor payback, I'm just showing in terms of, it tells you from the effect from 1st July 2021. And your calculations, they started from there because the effectiveness of that came from there. So how come now the other one is, it was treated as differently? To me, it's a non-consistency. It doesn't, because from my point of view, you start in the time a contract, it starts and then you move forward. I don't know in terms of good governance, but from where I'm sitting, that unless that is why it always stipulates, then you say you do it in retrospective. Then that is the word that is always, then you use it in the governance. Then you say retrospective, then everybody will understand that. It's a pity that this never came to council, because you would have had a direction to say, what is it from where, from your base of calculation? Where does your base of calculation start? But chairperson, I'm not happy with it, because I think from where I'm sitting, the effectiveness, looking at that pattern, is supposed to be in effect from the time of June. But I understand where the CFO is coming from. But for me, in terms of good governance, I'm not satisfied with that. Yeah.
Chairperson, maybe just some closing comment is the difference between those two calculations is that the second one, the 300,000 rand, is the effect of the upper limits for councillors that was published in June 2022. And that upper limit said this is for remuneration for the period July 2021 to June 2022. And that is why that calculation starts, because that is this explicit term of that published gazetted upper limit document, where the interpretation on the exit policy said that the calculation is based on the years of employment from the beginning to the end. But I do hear what you are saying. It doesn't say retrospectively. So there might have been a different way of reading it. So from an administrative point of view, as the policy says that the actual approval of the payment should be approved by the mayor. So then prior to the administration making payment, we then contacted the mayor to say that, are you satisfied? So that was the process that we followed in terms of the policy. Chairperson, then there were some questions around on page 68 with regards to the municipal manager salary. So I think I'm going to ask assistance from my colleagues in terms of the waiver, but maybe just to say that my understanding from a waiver application, it is done once at the time of appointment, or it could be done at some point during appointment, and then that waiver would then cover the period of that contract. But colleagues can perhaps assist there. I just wanted to clarify the reason for the reduction from 1.8 to 1.6. And the headers there perhaps is slightly misleading. The reason that reduced is because the municipal manager, or Mr. Strato, which is the person in that note, he was not employed in March. So essentially that 1.8 is a 12-month figure, where the 1.6 is an 11-month figure. And of course, then included in that 11 months that is disclosed up to June 2022, there was a marked reduction in the package when Mr. Strato was newly appointed in April. So that the fact that it isn't again a 12-month comparison, but it's an 12-month comparison. And because of the reduction on the new appointment contract, that is what contributes to the fact that those two numbers decrease in that period. I don't know if anyone else. Sorry. If it wasn't in the policy, maybe it was in the minutes, but we can check on that. And I believe somewhere it was stated that this exit gratuity was intended to be for exiting and non-returning members. I'm convinced it's somewhere. And if it's not there, I also believe that we should recommend to council that we revisit that decision, because there's no need for a person to get remunerated for an exit gratuity if you are coming back, because you will get it when you leave in the second term or the third term or whenever. So my recommendation would be that we refer this back to council and to have it amended if it was interpreted correctly.
Thank you. We will formulate the recommendation once we are through this one. Is there some of the colleagues, CFO, that want to comment specifically on that basic salary? Or is it clear?
Chairperson.
Christo, please continue.
Thank you, Chair. This exit strategy, I mean, is this firstly, is this a policy that is being implemented or done throughout South Africa? I believe not. I think this is the first time I heard of this policy. That's the first point I want to make. The other point, and then I want clarification pertaining to this payments in lieu of leave. does it mean that people that didn't take leave, he said no, he doesn't want to take leave, he rather has the money. Because I know for a fact in industry that is a very unhealthy situation. You need to have people take leave, otherwise they get overworked. Obviously, that's the first thing. The second thing is that from a risk viewpoint, if there's someone, and I'm not pointing figures, I'm talking generally, if the guy doesn't take leave, maybe it's something to hide. And a lot of things in the past in my lifetime in the audit profession, it's normally those guys that didn't take leave is hiding something, and then the day that he takes leave, you find out, okay, but this is wrong, that's what they've done, this is what they've done. So for me, I think payment in lieu of taking leave. And secondly, there should also be a maximum. I mean, you can't let people's leave accumulate to 150, 160 days. There must be a up, and that's also a norm. You can't go on and on and on. Make it 40 days, and that's the max that you can claim or you can take leave. Otherwise, you lose your leave. I just would like to have the clarification on that as well, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Christoph. Can we get clarification on the leave and what the policy is saying in terms of how many days a person is allowed to accumulate and the payout of leave?
And Chair, who's eligible? That is critical.
Jay, I'll give my comments and then other colleagues can also respond. To, I think, Mr. Lamprecht's question, there is a policy of council that limits your leave balance to 48 days. So you cannot, well, you might be able to accumulate more, but the council will only take responsibility for up to 48 days. We do not encourage that the payment of leave. The policy says you must take your leave, you must take your leave. It's only under exceptional circumstances that due to operational requirements, you asked for leave and you were not able to take leave because of whatever reason, that there then will be a consideration for the payment of leave. And then as Alderman Chaba also alluded to, the MME's situation is, or shall I say that at the end of anyone's employment, if you've got an accumulated leave balance, you then get paid, you get paid that accumulated leave up to 48 days. So because the MM's contract does has an expiry date, that is why you will see the payment in lieu of leave for his contract. I'm not sure. I'll have to check the ones that I've later referred to in the prior year. I don't know if someone else can assist me there in terms of policy, but I know that because the MM's period actually, his contract actually expires, it is then dealt with in the same manner that at that point leave can also be converted into cash. I'm not sure if there's a limit on the HOD's accumulated leave balance. Maybe someone can assist me.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'm saying that then you must be, then give us a direction to say, when did his last, month, so that we are able, because in 2021, you check there that in underpayments of leave, there is 141. So where does that come from? The one from 2022, you understand, because that could have been his exit in that period of 6 months, wherever. But in the prior years, how do you explain? Because that 2021, it's not his exit. It could not be not his exit on the 2021 in the year of 2021. So how come that we have that? And while the policy states very clearly that you ought to take your leave and you cannot cash out. So we need that explanation, Chairperson. We need that.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, no, it's something that I've also picked up. I mean, if your contract runs for 5 years, in the case of the MM, which is basically an organization of council to the next council. If you look at the max salary that was the upper limits and what is being paid out. So this means this person is paying out pretty much 1.5 months worth of salary on leave. So he never took leave during the year. It's like 45 days of leave he accumulated according to the payout. Doesn't make sense. And another thing I need to just clarify or get clarification on the remuneration is, if we talk about upper limits, my understanding, and I could be wrong, is that that's all inclusive. That's cost to company. That is it. Whatever you do with it in that amount is your amount. But if I look at this, the upper limits, the basic salary is already equal and above the upper limits, hence the waiver. But then we still add on medical aid, performance bonuses. Well, performance bonuses is debatable, motor vehicle, cell phone. All these things should be included into the cost of company, if I'm correct. I just need clarification on that, because otherwise the salary is inflated by pretty much 100% from upper limits to with all the add-ons. So I just need to get clarification on that. Thanks, teacher.
Thank you. Can we get clarification? Let's start with the 2021. Seems there's a 141 payout on leave. Is that correct? And then also the rest of the question that was raised by the councillor Kunra.
Chairperson, I can't off the top of my head give you an answer for the 141. I don't know if the committee will allow us to go back and to make a submission. Like the alderman is requesting an explanation for the committee. I do not know off the top of my head what the answer is there. I can say from the financial side, in terms of process, again, there will be approval documentation that comes to the finances office for payment. And we'll just have to consult that in order to give you a proper answer on that. Then to the question on total remuneration and basic salary, the breakdown you see there is in terms of it is within the total package that was contracted. That amount we all know for the prior contract ending up until the end of February was above the upper limits, and that is why there has been discussions and items, etc., on the waiver application. But I can say that if council is satisfied with the answer in terms of the waiver application for the package, then I can say that those amounts added together is basically that package. I mean, we can give you a very detailed breakdown, etc., but those pensions and medical aids, etc., isn't in addition to. It is actually a breakdown of the contracted amount.
Thank you, Chair. Chairperson, I'm not satisfied. One with we'll give administration to go and get the explanation, because I think it is the right thing. But the waiver, I still didn't get any answer to that. The answer I got was that it was done. It should, for me, it should be there. For the mere fact that is 1.8, it should be there. But also critically, that in the year of there was a break that where the incumbent was out of the system, now coming back. That is why you get the 1.6. But in the beginning of that year, when was the beginning of the year? Was it in April? It was then the beginning of that year. In that particular year, that is why we need a breakdown. We need a breakdown, Chairperson. I'll tell you why. Because in the first month of the first term, there was again a 1.8. And then we asked, was there a waiver? Remember, what guides us is the waiver. If we got a waiver and approval, and approval is very critical for us in terms of assurance. We have to have those things in place. So for us to be able to say, fine, we accept those amounts, we must have those waiver in place. Failing to have not, then from where I'm sitting, Chair, that should be under irregular. It should be an unauthorized and an irregular and declared irregular and unauthorized. But as I say that in the instance now, we're giving the benefit of a doubt that those documents are there. Failing not, then those need to be declared. And I caution ourselves because it's better that we do the declarations rather than the AG do the declaration, because we are highlighting these areas based on the facts so that we are able to say, this is what it ought to be and is not, and therefore we are declaring from ourselves. And that is why we are here as an assurance body, and that's why we are here as MPAC. So those ones, Chairperson, that waiver, we will need you to give us a breakdown. We will also equally need you to give us the payment in lieu for 2021. We do not have those things. We need them in criticality. And also the other benefit and allowance, what are those? We also need a breakdown of those, because you're saying you already have a breakdown, but you still have other benefits and allowances that in the notes, they are nowhere in the notes. There's no stipulation of what does that consist. We need those breakdowns. It is important for us for transparency of these matters. Chairperson, from here, I think we have given a direction. We need those. We are not happy with that, and we will be able to have it so that we can apply our money.
Floor is open for other questions and comments. If there's no questions and comments from the floor, then the impact chair do have some other questions and comments.
Thank you, Chair. You bear with me. I went through this document. There is also where the executives in pages where it talks about the reimbursement of travel. Can I get an explanation? It's in pages 86, pages 86, where you get the current employee benefits on the notes of 55.4. In the prior year, you get, there's no travel and subsistence paid, but in the other year, then you get that you'll get from the 30 June 2021, you have all the travel and subsistence paid. Can I have the explanation as senior managers? Do you get that? And the pattern for me, the other year, not here now. And I just want an explanation for that. What does the policy say? And then why we have those breakdowns.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. In terms of what that is in principle, it is that if HODs travel, I'm looking at the roads HOD, for instance, because he travels quite a lot. He drives throughout the full region, and you will see there that, for instance, the amount indicated there was 72,000 Rand last year. So basically that is unpaid travel claims. It isn't remuneration, if I can put it like that, but it is processed through the payroll system, and then the AG takes all the payments from the payroll system and they wanted to see it disclosed. So we have to disclose it because it is processed via the payroll system, all these claims. But in itself, it is not a benefit. It is a reimbursement for traveling. And then for the current year, there were no unprocessed claims at the end of June, because that is actually, we'll see the header of that note talks to the municipality has the following current benefit obligations. So at the end of June, this current year, there were no obligations because at that point, all the payments were processed for the year under review. But last year, June, at that specific date, there were still unpaid travel claims. And that is why there's zero in the current year and there was an amount in the prior year. So that comes to just the effectiveness of process of claims, officials submitting them and then the salary section processing them.
Chairperson, lastly, I think I read this Also, the irregular expenditure, what I would have liked was for us to be shown at least the breakdown of what was as from that bid adjudication committee. So how far now in terms and what are those contracts? So that, you know, it gives us a sense of where we are in terms of the irregular expenditures. Chairperson, also, I saw the disclosures, under disclosures, we got a list of the disclosures. And also I read this in conjunction with the statement from the internal auditor when he was doing the reviews on the last item. You see that there is some disclosures from, I'll give an example, Shebi Twitchik, Ringtone Estate, and then you get all of them, and then they also go. But if you look in her explanation, there are some that employees that have direct or not direct, but they've got a relations with those who have companies. Now, one of the critical things I picked up, I wanted to find out, what do we do in terms of those that have relations, but they are part of the, what you call it, authorization within that. And that for me, it's a problem. So I wanted in terms of those, you give us explanation, because already that for me, it's the biggest conflict. You can't have being somebody of your relative or somebody you know, and at the same time, you have the authority to approve and to disapprove. And that it's a big flag for me, Chairperson. So I need an explanation for that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think what the elder lady is referring to, I find on page 81 under the note 47.8, which says awards to close family members of persons in the service of the state. So in the supply chain regulations, there are 2 regulations that talks to this type of procurement. The one is where you are precluded, there's another more important English word, prohibited from making awards to someone else who is in the service of the state, or whose director is in the service of the state if you are procuring anything. And then there's another regulation that says if you were to award work to a company, but then that company has family members in the service of the state, then you must disclose such transactions. So they are not prohibited transactions, but for transparency's sake, you must disclose them. So for instance, if I can make an example of one that is disclosed, for instance, is one of our financial officials is family members of someone that works for group editors. So we do lots of advertisements and placements in the paper. It is not prohibited, but because of the relationship there with a family member, we are disclosing it. I think in terms of approvals, I want to say that I think you raise a very good point to say that you mustn't have the family member as part of the approver of this transaction. The reality in the municipal environment is there are 2 ways for you to award something. It is either you have a contract with a supplier, and that contract is procured through the supply chain process. So the largest expenditure on this list is done with companies that the contract we have with them that is very specific on what you procure at what price is done through a whole host of officials and committees. And at that point, there's also that how we know about this is because it is declared during that process to say that I, as Piston Power Chemicals, want to supply chemicals to the roads department, but please note, I have a family member. So it's not prohibited, but it is transparently disclosed. So once that contract is then evaluated purely based on the rules of law of supply chain, that company is then awarded a contract, and that contract stipulates what you can buy for at what price. So at the later stage, when orders are generated off that contract, I think we must make sure that the family member is not part of that process. And I do agree that we can look at it. But I just want to say that no one here is able to just say, I want to procure something and do it by themselves. It's either done through a quotation process, which is also handled by a completely separate department, which then recommends the cheapest best quote, or it's done from a contract, which we have entered into following a completely transparent process where no one individual has powers to make decisions. It's through committees, etc., that those contracts come into play. But I think in the spirit of being even more prudent, I think we must check that even orders from these approved contracts cannot be approved by officials who potentially has a family member as a supplier. But I do feel that from where I'm sitting, there isn't a high risk of that causing any fraudulent or corrupt activities, because you can only get to a supplier by a quotation process or a contract, and no one individual in this organization has the power to unilaterally make decisions on those.
Chair, just a follow-up. I just want to state why I'm saying that, because it's got a potential of a risk. You have an influence. Everybody has an influence. It's about the influence. When we're in the committee, and I don't know how come we do not have the disclosure before. Isn't there a disclosure before the thing?
Sorry, I should have added that during that procurement process at the committees, there will be that disclosure, and affected people will then recuse themselves because it is done through those committees.
Then how come then the comments of the internal auditor at the back? Because in one of these chairperson, the internal auditor is giving us this, in fact, she's asking us that question. You say perhaps that particular is communication something. Yeah, it's a scenario. She's giving us that, and it means then it's a risk. We need to look at it. It's something that we ought to be considering and to have more controls. Because for us, it's about making sure that you do not leave gaps and you put on controls so that the system becomes an effective system and yeah.
Thank you, Chairperson of MPEC, and through you, Chair. It is correct that what the explanation of the CFO, that during the awarding of the actual contract, the conflicted employees were not part of that process. So we put that one aside. However, when services are then procured, I found an instance whereby the conflicted employee approved a certain requisition. And that is where my concern was, that although in the actual awarding of the tender, that process is flawless. However, in the other procurements with or service or business that we do with the service provider, the conflicted officials should then not be found within those transactions, because we are still exposed to any form of influence or possible fraudulent activity. So in order to close ourselves of any loophole, then they should not be involved at all. That is my 2 cents. And I discussed this with the CFO, and he also agreed that there will be more actions taken to clean out those other processes in the day-to-day, for the lack of a better word, transactions then with those conflicted companies. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, thank you. I looked at the salaries of the executive managers, and then I was reminded of that we were severely criticized in the public a few months ago, saying that our executive managers are getting paid exorbitant salaries. So my question now is, are those allegations true? Because at some point, those allegations will flare up again. So that's my question, Chair. Thank you.
Is there anybody that's in a position to answer that question? We're talking about market-related salaries, and I'm not in a position to know whether that is market-related, yea or nay.
Chair, thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I saw that allegation, but it was a bit misleading because I don't think that we are exorbitantly remunerated. Our salaries are in line with what is prescribed in the regulations for salaries of senior managers as prescribed in terms of the local government system state regulations.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the draft annual financial statements?
Chair,
Please continue.
thank you. I just want to go back to the situation pertaining to the contractors and then related family members working. Obviously, if there's someone that works for the Department of Education in Cape Town, then obviously that's not the risk. My question pertaining to a risk scenario is, it's good to know that people submit and say they've got related, but the risk is what contractors there are that actually don't come forward and declare. How do we deal with that? Is there a clause in the contracts that will then penalize him, or can he get his contract cancelled if he doesn't, stay upfront that there's family connections? And because the risk is not for the guy that's honest, your risk is for someone that is devious and not declare a special interest. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Lambrecht. No, I think I agree fully with you that the risk is not for the one that discloses, but for the one that doesn't disclose. So from where we stand is during the procurement stage, when you complete your tender documents, your bid that you submit, together with your price and your product, etc., there are various standard forms, one of them being this declaration. So you are explicitly asked to declare, and then during the bidding process, it does state that if any of your declarations are found to be fraudulent, then that will have consequences to obviously the one being the cancellation of the contract. But there is a specific stipulation to say you must declare, and if you don't declare, fraudulent declarations, including non-declaration, will be dealt with through the legal processes. At the audit stage, the auditors also have access to lots and lots of additional data, national databases. So they also run our suppliers and their directors and everything through these databases. And it has, I think in the 4 years that I've been here, I think there was one instance where they did find a situation where we traded with a company who had a director in the service of the state, and we then followed processes on how to address that. But because we don't have access to all the government databases, we can do no more than actually ask for an honest declaration and then deal with it if it becomes, if we become aware of the fact that that is not true and not the truth.
Chair, lastly on this, Chair, I think also we need to take cognizance of in terms of the contingency liability. I think it's critical for us to resolve these matters because, look, we have to declare them now because if anything, but we've got to look at them. So I think on the comments of just to note it, that we do note as a committee and we have to work on those. And also our debtors book, particularly for fires and so forth, we need to work on that, Chairperson. I think it's critical for us. Each and every cent that we don't have, we must collect. It is the right thing to do. And in terms of the financial viability and sustainability. I think because also the annual report, we do deal with it. I think that is where now we can find to say what are the strategies that are there. So we probably will deal with it there, but we do note that we do have to have tangible strategies, financial sustainability strategies in place, and us to concentrate and not to be everywhere. Look at our mandate, what is our mandate, and then move from there. But also what can also assist, we must also note, Chair, in terms of the district funding model also is a bit problematic. We cannot run away from that. It's also not assisting us. But however, in the absence of that, we need to be cautious. We need to save where we need to save. We need to be and also cut where we cut, and also to be prudent. So for us is also to us as a committee will deliberate on that, because we must be able to give the national the local government to say that we have to work on this funding model. Perhaps the district model that is currently, perhaps it also might assist us, but I don't know when it comes to the funding model, what is the expression of it. So Chair, I thought let me put those comments, because I think are critical for us as MPEC, is things that we need to take up as a committee. And lastly, Chair, I think that this is where now the criticality of us as the APEC and the internal auditor and MPEC to work together, because I could see the shortcomings. One of them is that if we look at the leave, the leave, I don't know whether there were ever reviews done in the last 5 years of leaves and so forth. And also my problem is because also that, but we will talk about it in the annual report, because you also have things that we say there. But that for me, it's something that we need to work on the leave. And also the IS, because if you look at the processes, the information technology processes, I don't know whether we have somebody in-house who can do that work in terms of making reviews on IS, making sure that, so at this moment in time, we're sitting here, we might not have done reviews on our IS system. So those are critical things that I'm picking it up now as I'm sitting here and we're asking the question, and it's things that MPEC we've got to work on so that we can assist the internal auditor and the audit committee to ensure that these reviews are being done. Thank you, Chairperson.
Please continue.
Thank you very much, Chair. Now I was not going to respond, but I just want request to be excused. There is a program that is going to take place at 11 o'clock, and I'm on the program for where the mayor and the minister for unity are participating in. So I have to speak on behalf of the municipal manager.
Accepted. Is there any further comments on questions, or can I conclude on the financial statements, Pamela?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if other lady needed me to respond to the two queries that are directed to internal audit. However, in trying to respond to that, our internal audit plan is running on a 3-year cycle, the strategic one. Therefore, we try and identify in terms of the risk ratings in the risk register, as well as our own risk matrix. We identify audits to perform in the 3-year cycle. And then in order for the operations, we'll then streamline them for this year, what audits we are performing. So speaking to the past 5 years, yes, an audit on leave was done in the past 5 years. Last year, when we audited HR, leave was not part of our plan for last year. But in the current plan that was approved by the audit committee, leave is to be audited. Therefore, we do audit leave, but HR, because it's a big section on its own, we don't audit each and every unit in HR on an annual basis. But in a 3-year cycle, definitely all the areas would have been audited. And then in the second one, I think you meant to say ICT. Yes, ICT, we do audit ICT. In the 3-year cycle, 2 years ago, we did an extensive IT audit. Our scope as it changes from each audit was mainly on the governance of IT, because that is the start of everything, ensuring that all the governance processes are in place. I think it was about 12 findings that were raised during our ICT audit 2 years ago that we raised, and recommendations were put in place for management to implement. And in the previous year, we were following up on all those 12 findings that were raised on ICT. And from then up until now, most of those were implemented. That is why in this year, Trix is still here. We have an audit on IT that is ongoing, that is active at the moment. And that audit this year is no longer just looking at governance then. It is looking at other aspects. Security is one of them. Applications is one of them. There are things like programming, which is more technical and requires certain audit techniques like CATs that we do not have, that we don't audit, as well as not duplicating the efforts that have been done by the AG, because the AG also does their own analysis. So we look at the different objectives that we do and we collaborate efforts. And I would also add to say that IT is one of the compulsory audits that we need to do. And for that reason, the AG requests the work that we do on IT on an annual basis. And up to this far, AG has been satisfied with the level of assurance that we're providing on our ICT. But as I'm saying, every time we change our scope, what we're looking at, depending on what has been done. As I said, 2 years ago, our governance of IT was not up to par, which in the past 2 years, we've been working closely with IT, that the governance has now been bettered, and we're looking at other areas of IT. But the scope has been discussed with the HOD as well as the manager of IT, but that audit is in process as we speak. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, or can I conclude from the side of APAC? The chairperson of APAC can make their own recommendations, or they can agree with our recommendations. It is the, I really say prerogative. When I learned to speak English, because I grew up with Tswana and Afrikaans, English did not exist. I started reading the dictionary to find the appropriate words, and then I took out the girl and I referred to provocative instead of prerogative. I was in all kinds of trouble. On a serious note, ladies and gentlemen, from the side of APAC, we recommend that the annual financial statements as put in front of us been accepted by APAC and submitted to the AG before the 31st of August, with the proviso that the CFO will clarify the financial payment in terms of leave for the 2020-21 year. And if it was not dealt with correctively, also deal in the notes with that specifically, whether it's irregular or whatever the case may be. Then we also recommend that the exit gratuity policy be referred to council, especially that deal with the interpretation of the policy. I know that MPAC would like to look at the policy as a whole. That is not for us to decide, but from the APAC, it is a matter of if the policy continue, that we get clarity on the interpretation of the policy. And then the second recommendation is that we recommend that there must be assurance that when family members are part or related to a tenderer, that these family members under no circumstances must be part of the total supply chain process. APAC members, is these recommendations acceptable to you? And is there any other recommendations that you want us to add before I hand over to the MPAC to make their recommendations from their side?
Chair, no, that's good enough for me. And We will obviously look at the leave and the audit of leaves, and then we will have a in-depth analysis as to the policies pertaining to leave. Thank you.
Advocate Mtunzi,
Agreed, Chair.
and Suren Maraja. Okay, see, we still have a problem with that side. So we do have a quorum with the 3 audit committee members. So these recommendations and acceptance will then carry, and I hand over to the impact chair from the impact side.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think from MPAC, I think we do agree, unless there's any other views, what the chairperson of APAC has alluded. But I also equally want to put that in terms for us also to add the waiver that we need to, because that will clarify in the public to ensure that we are giving according to the regulation, whatever salaries of executive managers. So that waiver become critical to us. So we just want to add that, Chairperson. And but all the discussions, I think if the other members, they can add something, but I think those were encompassing the financial statements, the annual financial statements. Agreement? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We move to point 6. That is the unaudited annual report. Of course, this is a document that will only be tabled to council by December, but the document is in front of us, and the floor is open for any preliminary comments. Of course, there's always a chance to make further comments at a later stage, but at this stage, this is the document that is in front of us. I have only one comment from my side, more a question or comment. I've picked up that a lot of the information in the document deal with the 2019 and 20 financial year. And I was just wondering, especially in the statistics side, if there isn't a little bit more relevant statistics that deal with the 2021 financial year, because we're already in 2022. But otherwise, I have, from my side, no other comments on the annual report at this stage. Floor is open for comments and questions.
Thank you, Chairperson. If I can just respond with regards to the statistics. At the moment, the statistics that we use, you know, that Stats SA's last census was 2011. So Provincial Treasury assists municipalities with statistical information, and the latest information that they provided us is from Mero 2021, and all the information that we've used is from Mero 2021. I just maybe should go check whether some of this, where I said 2020 under, you know, where I make a reference, it shouldn't be 2021, but all the information is from last year and it's the latest. So
Thank you for that clarity. Any other comments or question on the unaudited annual report?
Chair, just 1 or 2 questions from my side. The one quick question relates to 2.6.1 under page 126. So there reference is made to the fact that a service provider was appointed to deal with all issues of fraud and corruption. Now, and then in the same paragraph, a reference is made to the fact that no issues or incidents of fraud and corruption were noted for the year under reporting. However, insofar as other municipalities were concerned, there were, and those were referred to the municipalities. My question is there no reason why we shouldn't mention who those municipalities are, as well as maybe the highlight the issues that were raised? So that's the one question. And then the last one is the Ages report, chapter 6. Is there a particular reason why it comes right at the end of the report? Thank you, Chair.
thank you, Chair. The question with regards to the legal, I think Mr. Loliwe, you can maybe assist with that question. It's Nadima's now not here, she left. You know, I sourced the information from all the different colleagues. So Yeah, what was the last question? This is the one that I can respond on. Okay, according to the why it's last, Circular 63 gives an indication of what must come where. So we've just taken exactly the way they've put how the content must be in the annual report. We've taken it exactly as it is. So it's indicated that that's where that portion must be.
Does that answer your question, Advocate Mthunzi?
Correct, Chair.
And thank you, Chair. I think the advocate also asked if on the annual report we can disclose the fraud allegations that are for the other municipalities. Was that the request, advocate?
Yes, it was, because for me, when I read, it's so general. You know, we mentioned, if we bring it here, then let's mention it, because we're saying there were no issues of fraud and corruption insofar as we are concerned. However, there were for the other municipalities. So I'm saying, if we mention that, then why don't we just, you know, at a high level and mention who those are and what those issues were?
Okay, thank you. I think we just need to look at the risk that we might expose ourselves to. If we look at the process, we are only administering the fraud hotline for the region, for us as an institution, as well as for the municipalities as well. So we receive these allegations at a central point. Then from there, the process is that we escalate, we deal with ours, and we escalate the ones for local municipalities to deal with them. And then from there, they interact directly with the service provider and giving feedback and resolving all those issues. So our role there, it ends at receiving and allocating to a specific municipality. So we might not have all the information in terms of disclosing because if we disclose the type of the allegation, we might as well then at least give the user the context from both sides, which we might not have. Hence, we end at discussing only ours, and we do believe that if their own reports, then they will have to elaborate. We also did not even mention the municipalities, because if I look at it at the back of my head, I think it's less than 5 that we've received on behalf of the municipalities, and then they were communicated to the municipalities. We don't want to find ourselves disclosing fraud-related matters of the municipalities, and those municipalities coming back to us with a different view on what we have done. We just need to manage those relations and the risks as well. But I think it's something that we can consider and see how we can manage it going forward. But if we do, really we'll have to get consent from the relevant municipalities, given the nature of the risk that is involved. Thank you.
Thank you for the answer. Maybe if I can just come back to the statistical or the information in general. If I take by way of example on page 44, that deals specifically with safety and security, then all those figures, murder, sexual offenses, etc., are all for the 2021 financial year. There's no information on safety and security for the 21-22 financial year. So I was just wondering whether those stats, because they were already available on the radio, so definitely if we can a little bit update these safety and security information, but with the 2021-22, it can just assist the reader to get a better perspective. And there could be some other areas also where it's sort of these kind of information that is not in for the 2021-2022 years. If they are not available, we all understand. These things usually take time to compile them and to verify them and to publish them. But there are certain areas that the information was already available on the radio and TV. So it will be just nice to see it also in the report. Impact, Chair?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I know that we're going to, as MPAC, we're going to get another time that we're going to deal with it. But just for the sake of just giving a bit of, so that, you know, everybody out there that understand the areas of concerns. One, if you look in terms of our objective, which is always AG also looks at it, because your objective, they become your strategic objective, they're critical for your direction that you're going. So according to the functions of the district, and us being the enabler, I just find that at times we tend to shift. There's a shift because because the objective as they are being listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it becomes critical. Because if you say the first objective is to have a skilled workforce and communities, then you have to work on that. Then the second one is about bulk infrastructural coordination, which is then you speak then to your projects. Are they the project that we are busy with now? Are they bulk infrastructural coordination project? You see, and then your financial viability, because it assists with the financial viability. Because if you have the right projects that are funded, then you are able to have your financial viability. So at times, I think that, for instance, I'm just saying there are a lot of things that are within not our mandate that we will tend to shift to it, and the whole focus goes there instead of concentrating on what is mandated, what is part of our strategic objective, and we are able to be funded for it, and then we can be able to have financial viability. So I just want us perhaps we will look at it, the projects that are currently there. I think as the committee is also good that we say perhaps council should concentrate. For instance, now what is mandated, the landfill, it's a mandate that we have. We concentrate on it, we ensure that it works, and then it brings the financial viability and all the others. But there are some that I think that is going to take a lot of our effort, and yet it's not going to produce the financial viability because they are second nature to us. They are not our primary focus in terms of the objective. So, and that for me, because I want us to look at, if you also look at in terms of the financial, I've checked the financial on page 242. The CFO is talking about revenue enhancement strategies and implementation plans and the long-term financial plans. We would like to have those CFO because they become critical. Council must be able to zoom into it and to work on those the implementation plans and those strategies. They have to be available, even if it's just, you know, so that at least, so that we can say in the immediate, the long-term and short-term. Because for me, some of them, they are longer term and they will have an impact now. We need things that will have an impact now. We need things that will have an impact later on. So that those strategies, they become critical for us to work on, so that these strategies, they are being, we work on based on those 3 spheres. Also, I've also noted that in terms of from the community services, Chairperson, in terms of the water quality, I'm worried because the infrastructural decay of the infrastructure. It's something that also ourselves, I know that it's a very huge concern, the water quality. It's something that we need to work on. It's something that we need to advocate on. And also, what are the revenue stream that we can get out of that? Because the decay of the infrastructure in the Southern Cape, it's a dire in the district. It's something that as a coordinating structure, we must be able to look into those things. And also, Chairperson, I've also looked at in the HR, there's a comment about policies and procedures not adhered to by senior management. We note that, and we will be able to look at that into detail. What are these policies and procedures that are not adhered by senior management? Because everybody should be adhering to that, and therefore, but it is tabled in the policy, in the annual report. And lastly, it's also the legal side of things. I see that there's too much pull of advocates. As if I saw a list, how does that work? Why are we having so much pull? Because in-house we're supposed to be having, it says that we are having 3 legal persons, but then you find a big pool of advocate. For me, I don't understand, because we are not in the business of legality, we are in the business of service delivery. So it's something that we ought to look at. And also, as I've said, I've alluded the bad debts. We ought to look at the bad debt in terms of the fires. And lastly is the internal audit unit, page 262. It talks about the development and implementation of quality assurance improvement program, and to provide reasonable assurance to various stakeholders. That is critical for us, Chairperson. I think we have to have and implement that quality, and how can we enhance that quality assurance for us, and ensuring that that unit is well funded, because it assists also us as MPAC, and also it assists the audit committee. Chairperson, for now, that is what I note, and I think as the MPAC, we will deliberate on other matters, but we need to note those things that are glaring for us in that report. Thank you, Chairperson.
Any other comments or questions on the draft annual report? Then I will conclude from the APAC side that we take note of the draft annual report as presented to us. In terms of reliability and completeness of the report, we have no reason to doubt that the information provided is reliable, and the report is a complete report in terms of the working of the municipality for this year under review. And we just request that there's a little bit of attention to more relevant information dealing with the 2021-2022 year, where applicable within the document and where it is available. That is what we recommend from the side of the APAC. I leave over to the MPAC chair to make a recommendation or to agree with our recommendation.
Chairperson, with my members, is there anything that you would like to add? Okay, then we also concur with that recommendation. Oh, there is.
No, I agree with you, and I think the document that's compiled is comprehensive and very well done. Thank you very much.
And therefore, we also propose that, Chairperson, and also with the highlights that we have highlighted.
In the next document is 0.78/2022, and it deals with the draft annual performance report that is submitted with the annual financial statements by 31st of August. The document is on the table in front of us. It deals very much with the top level SD BIP. And if one go through that document, you pick up what is red and what is green and what is almost met. I think we have all seen the document. About 10% is objectives not met. About 5% is nearly met. And the remaining of the 85% is either met or well met or extremely well met. The bulk infrastructure, objective number 5, is the one that is very much in the red. And I believe there's also good motivation and reason why certain of those objectives were not met, keeping in mind that we did go through a 2 year of COVID with a number of challenges. So the report is in front of us, and I open the floor for any comments or any questions dealing with the draft annual performance report. No questions, no comments?
Chair, from my side, from the performance section, any highlights?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. From our side, no, not at this stage. Everything is in the report. I would just like the two committees to take note that the document you have in front of you is version 4 of the document. There will be about 3 changes before we submit on Wednesday to the AG for auditing purposes. but none of those changes has any effect on the performance information, which is also audited and was audited, as well as the rest of the information. It's merely typo errors that we need to complete. But if there's any recommendations or comments, you're more than welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The floor is open.
No, it's fine, Chair. I think we are concluding. I was going to say, the performance office also prepared a 5-minute presentation on the document itself. But if you need, if you don't, so it's ready for presentation if you give it that 5 minutes.
Although we have a lot of appreciation for the effort that you have put in, I believe that the report is quite sufficient and it's a clear self-explanatory document. So thanks for the preparation, but I don't think we're going to need it today.
Thank you, Chair. The reason I did not allude to the presentation is because the presentation details what you've already alluded to earlier, which is the corrective measures, the bulk infrastructure, the KPIs met, not met, the reasons for it, as well as the explanation as per the objective for the organization. So you basically covered my presentation. Thank you.
Then on that note, can we get that presentation then? Yeah. But I'm glad that we covered.
Then my recommendation is that we accept the report as a true reflection of the performance of the municipality for the year under review. And we also compliment the people that have compiled the report and put it together, and we show our appreciation for that. Impact?
With my members, do we agree with that recommendation? Then shall we concur?
The last item is 8.8, and due to the fact that we have discussed the annual financial statements, there is no specific reason why we need to discuss the internal audit review. So my recommendation is that we accept the internal audit review of the annual financial statements as given to us under point 8.8. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of the meeting. Just from my side, my appreciation and compliments as APAC and all the members of the APAC for each and everybody that have worked hard during the year to make these documents available to us, and also the way it was presented to us, and also for the fact that we could have this meeting with a full set of members, nobody absent, and our appreciation from the APAC. And I'm going to give over to the impact to close the meeting for us from the impact side.
Thank you, Chair. Chair would like to thank you for APAC for being part of this meeting, and also the way that in terms of the deliberations we are thanking. And also I would like to thank my members for attendance and also giving inputs on this critical document, because after this is going to go to the public, and that's where now people are going to be able to see what are we doing as the municipality. But thank you very much also for the compilation of this. I felt really, Chairperson, very comfortable with these financial statements, and it is the true reflection. And thank you very much for that work from the CFO, from the MM, from the internal audit, and all the other units, the HR and community services, and all the others. Thank you very much. And therefore, just after that, I would like my members just for 5 minutes to stay behind, and then we can just conclude on the matter. Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you so much. I'm looking forward to working with you in the future. Thank you. And then the meeting is adjourned. And we also like to thank our viewers on the public domain. Thank you for viewing for us, our MPAC and APAC meeting. Thank you, and God bless. Thank you.